and welcome to the first video like this I have done. Gravity is written up there, and you'll find out later it's an important part of this video. That is a model of the Big Bang, and I'm circling the fact that the math breaks down here at 10 seconds, and they don't know after that what the real singularity is, and the whole model has scientific issues that need to be explained. But we're going to focus on Lawrence Krauss in this video and his theory of something from nothing. And thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe if you would like to see more videos.
Think about nothing, you have to be a little more careful than you normally are, because in fact nothing is a physical concept, because it's the absence of something, and something is a physical concept. And what we've learned over the last 100 years is that nothing is much more complicated than we would have imagined otherwise. For example, the simplest kind of nothing is the kind of nothing of the Bible, say an infinite empty space, an infinite dark void of the Bible. You know, nothing in it, no particles, no radiation, nothing.
Why did you invoke the Bible, nothing? It's not a biblical description, it's the dictionary.
Well, that kind of nothing turns out to be full of stuff in a way, or at least much more complicated than you might have imagined, because due to the laws of quantum mechanics and relativity, we now know that empty space is a boiling, bubbling brew of virtual particles that are popping in and out of existence at every moment.
Random particles popping in and out of existence in a time where there is no time.
And in fact, for that kind of nothing, if you wait long enough, you're guaranteed by the laws of quantum mechanics to produce something.
If you wait long enough. It's always about waiting long enough. No amount of time can help.
So the difference between empty space with stuff in it and empty space with nothing in it is not that great anymore. In fact, they're different versions of the same thing. So the transition from nothing to something is not so surprising.
You believe this theory based on laws you find arbitrary, that don't really apply, using gravity and time that you really don't understand. You've admitted as much. Where do we witness things popping in and out of existence? Popping in and out of space, yeah, because we live in a universe that has space. So no, it's not rational, and as we go forward, I'm going to try to help point out why.
Now you might say, well, that's not good enough because you have space. Where did the space come from? Well, a more demanding definition of nothing is no space. But in fact, once you apply the laws of quantum mechanics to gravity itself,
and here's where the self-admitted, little understood gravity starts to become gravity of the gaps. And if space is fluctuating in and out of existence, you got to figure out when in existence space will be there to put the matter of gravity. But that has to go with the theory somehow.
that space itself becomes a quantum mechanical variable and fluctuates in and out of existence. And you can literally, by the laws of quantum mechanics, create universes, create spaces and times where there was no space and time before.
But you had to add gravity, matter, to time and space in order for that to work, just as the Bible declared.
So now you've got no particles, no radiation, no space, no time. That sounds like nothing.
Because it actually is nothing. You're going to add the laws of physics and try to say that a law has mass? Well, the law does not have mass until the lawgiver gives it to it.
But then you might say, well, you know what? You got the laws of physics. You got the laws of nature. The laws themselves are somehow something, although I would argue, in fact, that that is not at all obvious or clear or necessary. But even there, it turns out physics potentially has an answer. Because
he goes on to guess some more about what the answers could possibly be and how somehow physics laws can be mass. But the one thing he can't do and hasn't done is disprove the possibility of intelligent design or God. And we'll see in the next video that's still the case.
To have Lawrence Krauss back on the program. He's a theoretical physicist, he's a cosmologist, a professor of physics, and also director of the Origins Project at Arizona State University. And what was there before planets, and what was there before the universe. And eventually, I think my brain just sort of breaks. And I start to think, okay, well, so maybe there was just empty space, but that also would be something. So help us suss out, how do we even begin to think about what there was before the universe, if that term is even relevant in this thought?
Well, you hit the nail on the head there. We have to begin to be prepared to change our ideas about what makes sense. And that's not unusual in science. What we're used to in everyday life may not be appropriate to describe the universe. And if you're talking about the beginning of the universe, the beginning of space and time themselves, then it's clear you're going to have to begin to give up cherished notions. Because, for example, if space and time just begin when the universe begins, which I think is the most reasonable assumption, and in fact my last book is more or less describes how plausibly that could happen.
That is actually God's assumption, because that's what the Bible says in Genesis 1:1.
And then if time didn't exist, there was no before.
Before there was time, space, or matter, there was God. And that is the creative force behind these things that suddenly pop into and out of existence, that our universe happens to be one of. Eternal is timeless and limitless, and our God is not confined by these laws that you don't agree with anyway.
And then all these ideas about cause and effect go out the window. We have to change our ideas. But you're absolutely right. If you have space and nothing else, there's still something. But the remarkable thing, and one of the reasons I wrote my last book was that if we understand gravity as a quantum theory, then space and time themselves are part of that theory.
You just literally said that time, space, and matter are in that theory that's been around since the Bible was written.
And become dynamical. And just like in normal quantum physics, particles can pop in and out of empty space.
You said they pop in and out of existence, not in and out of empty space. And time travel has already been explained through quantum physics, so that's really nothing new. What you're trying to do is avoid, again, the how did it get created. It did not exist to cause itself to exist, or that's a logical contradiction. So you do have to have a creative force behind the universe, whether there's many of them or just one.
Space itself becomes a quantum mechanical variable. Space and time themselves can pop out of nothing. You can literally have no space and suddenly pop a universe with a very small universe initially with space and time right there. And so literally the space that is our universe need not have existed before that quantum event. And what's amazing, and to me it's worth celebrating, is the fact that if that happened, you can ask sort of what would the conditions be that would on a universe that began that way, and what would it look like today, and more or less the characteristics of the universe that we look at and we see are precisely those characteristics of a universe that would have been created from nothing by some quantum mechanical event. So
that quantum mechanical event was God, sir, because nothing can just poof itself into existence. That's spontaneous generation, and it's disproven. You said these little particles pop in and out from empty space to empty space. That is not popping in and out of existence to existence. If there is a space to pop in and out of, then that space had to exist first. The universe will end, and as it will end, scientific law requires that it will have a beginning. You're trying to explain that beginning process now. And the reason you're doing so is because the possibility of a creative force is highly likely in the creation of the universe. There is something outside of time and space, and that would be the immaterial creative force that created the time and space. Since the universe can't create itself, because you can't not exist to cause yourself to exist, that's a logical contradiction. That brings you to the immaterial creative force. Some people would like to say flying spaghetti monster or magic man in the sky, but the God of the Bible has a testimony, and the God of the Bible is reliable, and I hope to make a video on that one day. Reliability is very important to finding the truth.
everything is consistent with that plausible possibility. Now, I want to emphasize it's just plausible.
God is a plausible theory based on your theory. If any of those multi-universes that you proclaim that may exist have anything in common with our universe, they will end. And if they're going to end, the cause and effect applies, which means they require a beginning. If then it requires a beginning, that means it requires a creative force outside of the time, space, and matter. And I'll go with God of the gaps rather than your gravity of the gaps.
Because we don't have a full quantum theory of gravity. We can't do the calculations. So this is a plausible argument, but not yet ironclad.
When we think about quantum gravity, is that sort of, instead of thinking about it as we know gravity to function on Earth, is that a good way to sort of hypothesize about what we mean?
We've already had to change the way we think about gravity. Einstein made us change our thinking about 100 years ago. In fact, actually, exactly 100 years ago.
What is gravity?
You have no idea. Okay, next question.
I think this week, maybe, when he published his theory of general relativity, where he demonstrated that gravity, the force we feel on Earth pulling us to the Earth, is actually a representation of the fact that space is curved, that matter and energy actually curve space and time, literally, and that we therefore no longer think of gravity as anything but a property of space-time. And space and time themselves respond to the presence of matter and energy in a way which is described by Einstein's equations.
You have no idea what gravity is on the physics scale or the quantum physics scale, yet you're using this gravity of the gaps for the solution to all of your problems with universe coming from nothing and going back to singularity. All of this because you just refuse to accept the Bible, as it has pretty much the same thing with the creative force as well.
And the variables of gravity, then, the important thing that determines what happens are the quantities of space and time. And in quantum mechanics, if I make space and time quantum mechanical, then on very small scales, they'll fluctuate because quantum mechanical objects fluctuate on very small scales. They're what are called quantum fluctuations. As I say, in atoms, there are quantum fluctuations of electrons and photons and all sorts of things going on. But if space and time themselves become quantum mechanical, then space and time will fluctuate. And that's the idea, that ultimately on very small scales, you could literally have baby universes popping in and out of existence all the time.
For some people, when they hear this conversation, they say, you know, it just makes much more sense to me that God created all of this stuff. Now, even for the non-religious, my question is not for you to address that. My question is, for the non-religious, can you see how it can, because it's so hard to even really understand this, it can be a challenge to say, yeah, I can get behind that. That makes sense to me.
Yeah, I can certainly see this wild, what apparently is a story, seems to make very little sense or seem implausible, except we're driven to it.
You're driven to it because the atheistic evolutionary worldview is everything has to be by natural means only. You're only driven to it, shows your bias. Thank you for admitting it.
The difference is that we didn't invent it because we liked it or we wanted it to be that way. Experiment and has driven us to that.
I'd like to see the experiment where little tiny universes are created from nothing, please.
And the difference is the story makes predictions.
No, you have the story and work backwards.
It makes predictions about how the world works, and in fact, those predictions can be compared with observations and they're the best predictions in all of science.
I can predict from the scientific standard of observation that life comes from life, not non-life. I'll predict that I'll never see non-life produce life, per the theory of biogenesis. I'll also say, due to observation, that the creator or life giver is outside of time, space, and matter.
The predictions that quantum fluctuations are happening inside atoms allows us to calculate the energy levels of electrons in atoms and compare it to observations to over 10 decimal places of accuracy. It's the best prediction in all of science, so we know it works.
No, you really don't. You don't understand gravity on the smallest scale or the largest scale, and it's a very important part of your theory. If you don't understand that, how do you understand this?
And so the notion that these crazy things happen is not just a figment of our imagination.
That is exactly what it is until it can be tested, verified, and repeated. You haven't tested it, you can't verify it, and it's not been repeated. As you stated earlier in this video, it's plausible, but yet it's not yet proven. And I don't think it ever will be.
But something we're driven to by experiment.
You're driven to a natural explanation because the bias of science only calls for natural explanations. The current scientific paradigm only allows for natural explanations, by natural means only. It outlaws the supernatural as even a possibility. It's bias.
In order to really understand what it is that you're talking about, most people probably, based on their existence for a few years in the grand context of time, see time as very linear, A to B. Do we need to think of time in a different way to understand what may have been here before the universe, if anything?
Well, yeah, probably. We don't know exactly how.
Yeah, I'm laughing too. You just said that time, space, and matter had to come into existence at once, but now you're saying that you don't understand time. How can your theory even get off the ground if you don't understand time or gravity, two main parts of your own theory? Who does understand time is God. You might want to try what he has to say and see what you think. 1,000 years is but a day, and a day is but 1,000 years. I still can't comprehend it, and it sounds like it's something that you can't comprehend.
But as I say, if time began, then you have to start thinking a lot differently about how things work. But we don't have the answer.
If time began, it had a starting point, which means time will end. The Bible tells us this. So does entropy. So if time began, that means the person that created, or whatever created time, was outside of time, space, and matter. That is where eternal comes in, and where intelligent design is very plausible.
To that question about if time began, does it make sense to talk about it before? Those are interesting open questions.
The only thing that would ever fit outside of time would be eternal, and the definition of eternal would be an immaterial being, which means a divine creator or God is possible. So you can't honestly say that there is no God with any certainty. You actually believe that to be the case.
But again, to get back to the question we had before, which is why some people prefer to think God did it. The point of this is that these ideas make us uncomfortable.
They make you uncomfortable. Nowhere in your videos have you given scientific proofs or evidences that there is no God. It is that immaterial creative force behind time, space, and matter that is driving you to try to figure out scientifically and naturally what it is. It makes you uncomfortable because no matter how far back you want to go, in the back of your mind, you still know there needs to be a creative force behind all of it.
We don't know the answers, but that's better than saying, well, I'm uncomfortable, and therefore I will just I assume I know the answer because it makes me happy. That's just not the way the world works.
Then why are you doing it? Without the Bible or without any religion, I can observe biogenesis. I can observe mathematically through physics. If you go back to the very beginning of the universe, it still requires a creative force.
And it's incredibly exciting to see the way the world actually works. That's why I actually wrote my last book, because to me it's worth celebrating the amazing discoveries and the fact that the world works differently than we imagined.
It's a beautiful thing, and it works the way God designed it to work. Everywhere you look, you see incredible design. In the universe, Isaac Newton saw order and design. In life, in DNA, we see complex computer codes. That's order and design. And a little flagellum motor. It is designed.
That shouldn't upset us. That's called learning. That's the excitement of being alive, to realize that every day we can discover something new and exciting about the universe.
I'm currently reading Yuval Noah Harari's book Sapiens, and he talks about how there are just certain periods of human history that unless we have a time machine, we're not going to know more about. There is not evidence we can find. Is your sense that we will ultimately have a definitive answer about the origins of the universe?
My sense is I don't know.
Yeah.
And we'll leave it at he doesn't know, because he clearly doesn't. Lawrence Krauss has a theory based off of observation, the same as people that believe in God or intelligent design. We can observe the very same thing, and to take both theories from it. He'll tell you that supernatural is not a scientific theory because you can't see it or observe it. Well, you can't observe the natural creation of anything either. You can observe changes, but changes are from something that's already existing. Spontaneous generation's been disproven. So, nowhere have we ever witnessed non-life creating life or immaterial creating material. You actually have to believe that and take it on faith, just as those who believe in intelligent design.